Pokémon Red, the first generation. I remember loading up my Gameboy and absolutely destroying everything with zero strategy, just a Nidoking and Thrash. I didn't know type matchups, I didn't know my weaknesses, I just spammed my moves until I struggled. I quit playing Pokemon in the 4th generation of games. In fact, I can confidently say I never beat Pearl. Having a revitalized interest in Pokemon after playing Pokemon Legends Arceus, Pokemon Sword, and working on a living shiny dex, I wanted to return to the generation that started it all for me. So today, I took on the challenge of beating Pokemon Red without taking any damage. Sure, Gen 1 is really easy compared to other titles, but this seemed like a good entry point for a returning player. First off, let's get a rundown of the rules. I'm only able to catch one Pokemon per gym badge. That means my starter is all I get until I beat Brock. But after that, it is fair game where and when I catch my next Pokemon. I will not be allowed to use TMs. If a Pokemon doesn't learn the move from leveling or evolution, it doesn't learn it at all. HMs are allowed, however. I'm allowed to grind as much as I want. If I really wanted to, I could hit level 100 and sweep, but since I'm challenging myself to use strategy, I'll try to stay in line with, or a little above, the next gym's level. I must fight every trainer that I see. If I'm unsure whether or not I have fought them, I will talk to them. No running from any battles. Teleporting is fine, but no touching the run button. No items besides Pokeballs, key items, and HMs. Saving is allowed whenever I please. If this were done live, then maybe not, but limiting when I can save is just wasting time for no one's enjoyment. On that regard, however, there will be no save stating, allowed, period. This is emulated for the purpose of fast forwarding, but not to try to manipulate the outcomes of battles if RNG is undesirable. Finally, no legendaries. I will not be getting any of the legendary birds, and obviously not Mewtwo, since I can't get him legitimately without beating the Elite Four anyways. With that out of the way, let's jump into the very beginning. I started a new game, named myself Seth, my rival, Badman, and began my adventure going directly for the grass to get Oak's attention. I chose Squirtle, named them Turt, and found out I had made a big mistake immediately. Fighting Badman was going to be rough enough as is due to not being allowed to get hit. With no moves to protect me from all damage or make it more likely to miss, I knew I was in trouble. You see, your rival always chooses the Pokemon you're going to be weak to later on. The problem is that in this case, Bulbasaur knows Growl, a move that lowers your attack stat. The lower my attack stat, the more uses of Tackle I need to do, which means more odds of getting hit by their moves as well. I reloaded many of times before finally accepting that this wasn't going to work, immediately failing the run on my first fight. I started a new game. This time I chose Bulbasaur, naming them the One, as this time it would definitely work out. Nope, Charmander also knows Growl. Reset. With no other options, I chose Charmander, named them Victor, as that is what they're going to have to be, and began the battle against Squirtle. This time the odds were much more in my favor, as Squirtle knows Tail Whip, a move that drops defense, not attack, and since any amount of damage results in a reset, it was equal to doing nothing to me. It still took quite a few resets to get down, but after a bit under an hour, the first rival battle was finished and it was time to begin my adventure. I knew what the first order of business was. Besides saving very frequently because of Quick Attack Rattata, I needed to get Victor to level 9 to learn Ember. Viridian Forest was coming up fast, and with only a fire type for the Rock Gym, I was going to need to get stronger. So after grinding many Pidgey and Rattata, Victor learned Ember. I took to Viridian Forest, destroying the bug type trainers with my superior fire type, hitting level 12 before getting out of there for the first time. Did a bit more grinding knowing I'd need more power to get past Brock's Onix, so I leveled Victor to 16 to evolve them into Charmeleon. Entering the gym, I encountered an immediate problem. The first trainer's Diglett was surviving Ember with a small amount. If I couldn't one-shot a Diglett, I didn't stand much of a chance against an Onix, and with zero utility on my side, I went back to the grind a little longer. I stopped at level 19. First trainer's Diglett was one-shot by Ember. The Sandshrew withstood one hit, but used Sand Attack, which caused me to miss another, but they doubled down, which allowed me one more chance to hit another Ember, defeating the first trainer. Brock's Geodude was a bit more problematic. I had to bank on it using Defense Curl so I could use 2 Embers uninterrupted. The Onix got critical hit by Ember, which wasn't enough to take it down, but thankfully it screeched and was defeated by the next attack, granting me the Boulder Badge. With my first badge, I decided to catch my first Pokemon as well, which I decided would be Pikachu, found in the Viridian Forest. I caught my little level 3 boy and named it Joltik. Level 3 wasn't going to be enough for Misty's water types, obviously, so it needed to be leveled. The problem was, switch training wasn't viable. If I got hit, I'd have to reset. I thought about EXP share as well, but since I'm only ever going to be catching a total of 8 different Pokemon max after my starter, that's impossible, even including evolutions. But the painful process of spamming Thundershock began, as well as getting hit, and resetting, and resetting, and resetting. I stopped this painful process after hitting level 14. I'm only going to be detailing the points of interest past this point. Every individual trainer is fairly boring and about the same thing. It's usually ending in Victor using Ember, or X Pokemon using super effective move. I'm going to focus on grinding and progression. The trainers on Route 3 posed no real threat. A couple of resets were needed when I thought Joltik could handle an encounter or two. Spoiler, they could not. Mount Moon was about the same. Navigate the area, defeat a trainer, except this time I encountered a real issue, and a scary one at that. By the time I was near the exit to the other side, I was well near out of PP for Victor, with a hiker blocking the exit that I had to fight. With Joltik not being strong enough for most encounters inside of the cave, I could get soft locked. I can't use items, I can't take damage, so no whiting out, no escape ropes. My only option would be Dig, which I did not have a Pokemon who learns it. Thankfully, I ended up making it back to the Pokemon Center with very few uses of Scratch remaining. Turn to the Hiker with PP remaining was great except for the part where no matter what I did, I couldn't reliably one-shot his Geodude without a crit. And since he had 3 Pokemon, all rock types, I didn't want to play the RNG game if I didn't have to. So I quickly leveled Victor to 26, which allowed Ember to take them out in one turn. Next up, a Rocket Grunt, whose Raticate I most likely could have wiped with Victor, but I needed to save my PP for the Fossil nerd up ahead, so it was up to Joltik. All they had was one single Raticate. Easy enough, right? I had to reset quite a few times on this one as I needed random chance to be on my side. I paralyzed it with Thunder Wave, prayed that it stayed paralyzed, and spammed it down with Thunder Shock. The Super Nerd was taken out with ease using just Ember. I took the Dome Fossil, knowing full well I would never be using it, and went on my way. Arriving in Cerulean City, I had a bit of preparations to do first. Joltik still wasn't quite ready for Misty. I got them to level 21, hoping that would be enough, but first, my rival had a bone to pick with me. Batman's Pidgeot was quick. Too quick for Joltik, so I swept his poor team with Victor, Ember spam once again proving useful, except for Squirtle, who I paralyzed with Thunder Wave and used Thunder Shock to finish off. I battled the trainers on the bridge, uneventfully, fighting each and every trainer on the way to Bill, except for yet another hiker who stood in the way of my progress. With my damage being a little off the mark with Ember once again, for his rock types, I got Victor to level 31 and took him down. Found Bill, got my SSN ticket, and took on the second gym. Misty's trainers were helpless against my Joltik, who destroyed the water types in its path, except for Misty's Starmie, who outsped me every single time. On top of that, there was some RNG in this fight. If Thundershock didn't crit, or if Misty didn't use an X-Defend on it afterwards, I would take damage unless I was lucky with Paralysis. Not wanting to deal with more RNG as well as hoping Starmie missed the first move every time, I leveled Joltik to level 24, which still wasn't quite enough. Once more I got them to level 27, which was enough to one-shot Staryu on high attack rolls. I paralyzed the Starmie, hit it with a Thunder Shock, Misty used an X-Defend which guaranteed me the kill, and netted me the Cascade badge. Route 6 was plain uneventful, as Victor did all of the work, so skipping to Vermilion City I entered Diglett Cave, and caught my own Diglett, aptly named Wiener. I tried to train it up, but its move pool was too pitiful to do effectively, so I took the poor hot dog to the daycare and trained up my team a little while I walked about. I retrieved my Wiener from the daycare, who had reached a nice level 27. I felt about ready to enter the SSM, but convinced myself not to, as for some reason I thought that entering the ship would lock me in there until I was finished, which I'm pretty confident now is not the case. But to avoid a soft lock that I made up in my head, I trained up Victor some more, with the goal of getting them to evolve. So I wiped out a few trainers on Route 11, evolved my Wiener into 3 hot dogs, and evolved Victor into Charizard. Even though I was struck with fear of a non-existent soft lock, I purposely entered every single room on that ship, looking for anyone and everyone who would fight me. I once again Ember spammed the hell out of Batman, gave a good back rub, obtained Cut, which was taught to Victor, and got off the ship, never to be seen again. The third gym was up next. With a good ground type on my side, I felt confident in my abilities, until the first trainer's Pokemon kept spamming Quick Attack on me, which at the time of recording I thought was being outsped. So I went off to perform another unnecessary grind, getting Wiener to level 31. After getting lucky, I swept all of the trainers with Dig, rummaged through trash for longer than I'd like to admit, and destroyed Lieutenant Surge with no issues thanks to the power of the greatest move, Dig, granting me the Thunder Badge. With fairly good coverage for the next couple of gyms, I didn't know which Pokemon should be obtained next. I returned to Viridian Forest to obtain a Weedle, who would one day become a beautiful Butterfree. I could just feel it. This would grant me psychic coverage if I needed it, if I had remembered that bug moves were terribly weak. This would not have happened, even for the joke. Anyways, Butterfree was left at the daycare to level up, as I was not doing that by hand. I squashed some trainers, making my way towards the Rock Tunnel, which after entering it, I remembered now what the Rock Tunnel was. Having not obtained 10 unique Pokemon, and with that realistically not happening anytime soon, I couldn't obtain Flash, so I had to navigate the tunnel blind. I looked at the map and traveled through the tunnel with no real issues, no PP shortage, no troublesome trainers. I arrived in Lavender Town for all of 10 seconds before I immediately made my way towards Celadon City, which you guessed it, the trainers proved no real problem on the way. Well, inside of Celadon City, I purchased some drinks from the vending machine, and tackled the 4th gym, which also, unsurprisingly, had nothing of interest to talk about. Erica's grass types practically exploded from the sheer power of Victor, the overleveled man, obtaining me the Rainbow Badge. With another Pokemon to choose, I headed towards the game corner to get my coin case and the privilege of gambling, which I quickly decided was a terrible idea, and it ended up just purchasing all of the coins I needed to obtain a Dratini, who will be called Noodle. I entered the Team Rocket hideout with yet another nothing eventful to talk about. I walked around, wiped some grunts, got a lift key, and defeated their leader, allowing me to get my hands on the Sylph Scope to identify those pesky ghosts. The Pokemon Tower was nothing special. Victor dominated Batman just as quick as he appeared. The trainers inside claimed to be possessed or defeated mercilessly. I identified the ghost at the top to be a Marowak, which was killed with no remorse. I saved Mr. Fuji, got the Pokeflute, and finally decided now was the time to retrieve my Butterfree from daycare, for whatever reason. I progressed to Saffron City after that to secure the Sylph Code building. Of course, Badman was there, who I quickly told to go away, blah blah blah, uneventful. Victor swept everything, Rocket Leader defeated, Master Ball obtained. The 5th gym, technically 6th gym, was once again an extremely quick sweep. I had been using Victor far too much and it was showing. Just spamming Flamethrower was enough to get the job done. Marsh Badge obtained. For my next catch, I finally caught a Pidgey, named Cuckoo, who basically only existed to fly. Since almost no other Pokemon could be taught that HM in Gen 1. With the ability to fly, I began yet another grinding session. I leveled Butterfree a couple of times, evolving it into a Beedrill, just to realize I had made a small mistake. The daycare does not teach your Pokemon moves, and Butterfree had gone past the threshold to learn Twin Needle, literally the only reason I had this Pokemon in the first place. There isn't a move relearner in Gen 1, so with my even more useless bug type, I left it at its current level and began training Noodle instead. Noodle unfortunately only knew Wrap. The fortunate part was that Wrap is actually a very decent move in Gen 1. The unfortunate part being that it is extremely slow and not good for damage. As you can imagine, this grew annoying very quickly. Noodle didn't learn a better move until level 30, where it finally learned to Slam and evolved into Dragonair. This took 3 real-life hours. The goal was to get it to Dragonite for the Strength HM, so I took a break from the grind, obtained a Thunderstone, and evolved my Joltik into a Raichu, as they often do. I continued forward to Fuchsia City. With many more trainers being swept out by Victor, I finally arrived in Fuchsia solely to defeat the 6th gym leader, who I took out with just the move Slash, since it always crits. Koga didn't stand a chance and presented me the Soul Badge. Next stop, the Safari Zone. I entered it, threw rocks at every Pokemon I saw, found the secret house to obtain Surf, got the gold teeth, returned them to the Warden, granting me strength. With every HM needed in my possession, it was time to do the final push through the game. Well, almost. There was a rather large level discrepancy in my team, so grinding was in order once again. I traveled to Cinnabar Island to do some grinding in the manor, getting both Wiener and Noodle to level 55, finally getting me my Dragonite. Victor, Noodle, and Wiener. These would be the 3 Pokemon I use, as I evolved Joltik a little too early and missed it on the move Thunder, which was going to be required for them. I traveled through the manor, obtained the secret key, and dug my way out of there to begin the 7th gym. Dig and Earthquake absolutely destroyed Blaine's fire types, each and every move one-shotting his prior Pokemon. With the Volcano Badge in hand, it was time for the final gym leader in Viridian City, Giovanni. Noodle obliterated the trainers and his team with a few Surfs and a couple of Hyper Beams, giving me the final badge, the Earth Badge. Once again, Badman interrupted my momentum with a pretty stacked team. This had been the first encounter in a little while that had actually shown a potential problem. Sure, Hyper Beam could wipe the Pidgeot, Surf the Rhyhorn and Growlithe, Hyper Beam the Execute and Alakazam, but Blastoise? Hyper Beam didn't quite hit the mark. Although this was solved pretty quick by just trying to Paralyze, which was only helpful because I missed the first Hyper Beam but got a crit on the second one. Showing off my 8 badges to anyone who would listen, I made it into the cave, pushed some boulders for a while, and was at the gates of the Elite Four. Expecting this could give me some trouble, I had to figure out some counters. I had 2 choices, grind forever and hit level 100, or use my last few Pokemon catches to round out my team. After a failed attempt almost instantly with what I currently had, I chose option 2. To counter Lorelei, I decided to get the Eevee from Celadon City that was so rudely abandoned on the table, evolving it into a Jolteon, named Sparky. Better coverage on half of Bruno's team, and all of Agatha's called for an Abra, donned the name Spoons, which was great fun to train up. I threw it in the daycare, was actually careful how many levels it obtained, getting it to level 15, then switch trained for the first time ever on the most lethal Pokemon, Kakuna and the occasional Metapod, using Teleport on anything that didn't spam Harden. The last bit of coverage against Lance's Dragons was an easy choice. I picked up the Lapras, Shelly, that was offered to me a while ago in the Sylph Code building for Ice Weakness. With Abra evolving into a Kadabra from Switch training, I did something I initially thought was cheating, but later decided it was not since this is my challenge. I opened up a second emulator, loaded up Pokemon Blue, got the Pokedex, and traded my Kadabra both ways to get an Alakazam. With my final team ready and my spare catches exhausted, it was time to begin the final grind. For real this time. For Spoons, I went to Lavender Town and entered the Pokemon Tower, taking advantage of the weakness advantage of Confusion. I used the healing zone inside to avoid trips back to the Pokemon Center, going from level 16 to 44. Sparky was taken to Diglett Cave to spam Tackle on some Diglett, from level 25 to 31, learning them Thunder Shock. From level 31 to 42, Sparky shocked the water just outside of Cinnabar Island. Shelly also stayed in Diglett Cave, spamming Surf and Water Gun on anything that moved, from level 15 to 32. Afterwards, they took out the Pokemon in Cinnabar Manor from level 32 to 48. The goal was around level 65, to be just above Badman's highest level Pokemon, and to avoid any real RNG heavy situations. Sure, I could just take it to level 100 if I had the patience, but I would like to see if any threats existed with a slightly higher leveled team. It was evident my best option right now was to grind on Cinnabar Island. The EXP yield for the difficulty of the Pokemon were just more practical than anything I'd found. I continued leveling Sparky from level 42, not stopping until level 65. repeating this process with the rest of my team, besides Little Cuckoo, of course. After hours of real-time grinding and who knows how many hours in-game, it was finally time to tackle the Elite Four with my new and improved team. The final movesets were Victor with Slash, Flamethrower, Cut, and Fire Spin for any potential flinch requirements, Sparky with Thundershock, Thunder, Double Kick, and Thunder Wave for paralysis, Noodle with Surf, Strength, Hyper Beam, and Thunder Wave as well, Wiener with Dig, Slash, Earthquake, and Sand Attack just in case, Shelly with Surf, Ice Beam, Hydro Pump, and Strength, and Spoons with Psybeam, Psychic, Confusion, and Disable because I didn't learn anything better. For the Elite Four, I implemented another rule. There would be no saving between fights. Sure, for wild Pokemon encounters and gyms, I save between just about everything, but grinding isn't hard, so for this one scenario, I followed this rule for a small added challenge. First up was Lorelei. I opened with Sparky, taking down the Dugong with Thunder, Cloyster with Thundershock, and the Slowbro with yet another Thunder. Swapping to Victor to Flamethrower with the Jinx, back to Sparky to Thunder the Lapras. Praising Sparky for not missing a single 70 accuracy move, I continued to Bruno. For Bruno's rock types, I used Shelly as a start to surf the first Onix, then swapped to Spoons to take out both Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee with a well-placed Psybeam. Back to Shelly for Onix number 2, and once more to Spoons using Psychic just in case on Limachamp. Agatha required the least thought of them all. Spoons was the start and end of this battle, Psybeaming the first Gengar, Golbat, Haunter, Arbok, and finally a Psychic on the second Gengar, probably the easiest of the three in terms of any real thought required. Last up was Lance. I opened with Sparky for the 4x weakness on Gyarados, hitting it with just a Thunder Shock. I switched them out for Shelly to take out the consecutive Dragonair with Ice Beams, back to Sparky one more time to Thunder Shock the Aerodactyl as I was afraid I would be outsped if I kept out Shelly. One more time, Shelly came out to Ice Beam Dragonite. And that was it. I'd become champion. Or so I thought. Batman was already here, gloating about how he'd become champion for who knows how long, which personally I'd had enough of his taunting. Little did he know, I had went back and prepared counters for his entire team. The poor man didn't stand a chance. Batman sent out Pidgeot, which Sparky stopped the heart of with a Thunder Shock. Next he threw Alakazam at me, which after prior experience I knew could be taken out with Hyper Beam. Thanks, Noodle. Rhydon popped out, but with Shelly on the horizon there was no hope to avoid the Surf, which also happened to wipe out the Arcanine who was just watching from the sidelines. Executor was a little tougher and I knew this, so Victor opened with a Fire Spin to weaken them just enough for a Flamethrower to finish the job. With his final Pokemon in hand, Blastoise, things were looking pretty grim, but not for me. Sparky landed the 70 accuracy Thunder once more, allowing me to rip the title of Pokemon Champion from his hands before he had gotten over it. With Batman's reign over, after minutes of being the champ, I had beaten Pokémon Red without taking damage, plus a few extra restrictions, in just under 188 in-game hours. My Pokémon were entered into the Hall of Fame: Sparky, Victor, Noodle, Wiener, Spoons, and Shelly. Each one served a purpose. Sure, Wiener never really did anything against the Elite Four, but they were my digging buddy. They saved me so much time, as well as completely stomping Lieutenant Surge when I needed that most. If you liked the video, liking and subscribing would be appreciated. I mean, you made it far enough to hear me say about 4,000 words before this, right? Any ideas for another challenge? Leave a comment recommending it, and I'll consider giving it a try. I work on challenges whenever I have available free time. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.